Hi everyone, welcome to my Winter Wonderland cookie set. We're going to start off with our snowman carrying a couple of gifts. So I've already outlined my design in a yellow edible marker. So just to give me a guideline, I hand cut these cookies. You can see the edges are a little bit rough. So what that means is basically I just went around with a knife. I didn't have a specific cookie cutter for this design. So if you have an image or something, you can always print it on a piece of paper and lay it on top of your cookies, or trace it out on wax paper and cut around it and then put it on your dough and cut around it with a knife. And you can hand cut your cookies if you'd like. I usually like to use yellow edible marker if I'm going to draw my cookies because it's kind of the lightest color in case I don't quite pipe right on the line so it won't seep through too much. And when I'm piping on these outlines, I'm trying to go on the outside of the marker. That way you won't see the marker after when it's fully decorated. So I'm just going to outline all the shapes in white here. This is my white outline consistency. This is my thicker icing. And this is to hold in all the flood. And this cookie goes to show you that you don't always have to outline and pipe right to the end of your cookie. You can leave a little bit of edge. It's just as cute. So don't worry if you can't pipe all the way like most of the cookies are. This works just as well and looks just as great. And then we're going to go ahead and outline the presents here. So again, my outline consistency, this is my icing that holds its shape. This is going to hold in all that flood icing. And I'm going to let the outline dry for a few minutes. This way it'll be nice and sturdy when I go to flood it. The flood is going to keep nicely inside. So I'm just going to put some squiggles of outline consistency in his head. And this is just to prevent craters from happening. This is a little bit of a larger area. It's not so tiny, but sometimes indents happen as well. So I always like to just be sure, put a little squiggle down. Takes a few seconds, but it might prevent, quite a big crater. So always better safe than sorry. And use your scribe whenever you need to get them into the corners or you can't quite pipe into those little sections. And then I'm going to go ahead and flood his body. And again, this is with my flood icing. And so what I'm going to try to do with the outline is I'm going to try to cover it a little bit. So you can sort of flood beside the outline or try to kind of flood on top of it. So when I'm doing designs like this and I'm filling in everything, I try to pipe kind of on top of it. So the tip of my bag is actually beside the line, but the pressure that I'm pushing on the bag is kind of pushing the icing to surround the tip and a little bit over the edge. So just enough to kind of cover that outline, but not go too much over where it'll flood over the other side. Now, because our sections are not touching, I can go ahead and do the presents as well at the same time. Usually we wait for sections to dry, so you see I left a little gap for his scarf and his hat, so we're going to let the snowman body dry and then go in and do those details. But the presents are separate here, so I can go ahead and flood those right away. And of course, putting my outline consistency down first. So see the difference between my flood, which is I'm filling the cookie up with. It's kind of loose and it melts together, where my outline holds its shape. When I do kind of a back and forth zigzag, it's not melting together like my flood is. So it's kind of a good example between the dark blue present and the light blue. You can see my flood is all melted, but my light blue, all of those lines are holding their shape, and that's the difference of the two icings. And now we're going to go ahead and flood the top there. And I'm just going slow. Anytime I have smaller sections, I'm not putting so much pressure onto the bag so that not a ton of icing is coming. I just want to control the flow. So we're going to set this aside for a little bit to crust over. And then we're going to come back and fill in the scarf and the hat details. So moving on to the hat here, I'm going to outline the base and then I'm going to fill it with the same outline consistency. It's a very small area. My outline will be easily smoothed out. And I kind of put a lot of it. So I put a lot of pressure, kind of built it up a little bit, and then I'm going in with my scribe. If I were to do this on a big area, it would be very hard to smooth it out because it would kind of start to dry a little bit. And so I wouldn't be able to quite smooth it out. But when you're dealing with small areas like this and the top of the hat again, the same thing, I can just fill it in with that outline consistency and see how thick that is going in. So it needs to be smoothed a little bit with a scribe. But if I could put a good layer in there, I can get it smooth, no problem. This is where you kind of want your outline consistency not super stiff. You want to be able to smooth it out for these small, tiny details. And then we're going to do the same for the scarf here as well. So I'm just going to kind of outline my border so I know where I need to go. And any sections that are touching, those are the sections I want to leave blank. So we're going to come back to those ones because I want that separation between the icing so we see like separate sections. Again, this is all with my outline consistency. You can see the scarf isn't quite smooth there, so I just got to work it a little bit. You got to be a little bit quick. You can't take forever because the icing will start to dry a little bit and it'll start leaving marks where your scribe is going through. But we're not going for perfection here. Even if there's a few marks here and there, it's totally okay. As you work with the icing, you kind of get a hand of how, thick you want your outline and how, if you need to add a little bit of water to be able to smooth it out, and you kind of play around. Sometimes my outline is just way too thick and it doesn't smooth out properly. Sometimes it's too thin and it doesn't really work well either. So it's not always perfect. And even if you've done thousands of cookies, millions of cookies, there will always be time that you get it wrong. So don't be too hard on yourself. I promise you're the only one that sees all these little imperfections. And now I've just filled in the white part of the hat, so I did let these blue sections dry a little bit, and now I can go back and fill that. And when you're doing dark colors and light colors, a lot of people worry about bleeding. So it's very important to add white color to all your icing when you make it. That really prevents the bleeding. But also, if you have the option of doing a dark color first and then doing the light color next to it, that also helps because the dry color tends to absorb color from the wet color. So if you're doing a white color first and then a dark next to it, sometimes that lighter color will absorb the darker color. So it's not always possible. Like you see, I've done the body first and of course we put the scarf next to it. But because it's thicker icing, it shouldn't really absorb, and adding white color to all the icing prior when I made it, that really helps as well. So now that all sections of the scarf are dry, we're going to go in with our light blue here. And this is my outline consistency. And I'm just doing really small detailed lines, staying really, really close to the cookie. I'm not lifting my bag up because these lines are really small. If I lift my bag up, by the time I come back down to the cookie, it's probably going to be too long and go over the edge of the scarf. So almost kind of dragging my piping bag along the scarf there. Really light pressure, just a little pressure in the beginning to secure that icing down, get a little blob of icing at the end of my tip touch down, and then kind of pull it across, just slightly hovering above the icing. And I'm using my right hand to hold the bag and my left finger to steady and kind of guide the bag as well. And then we're going to go add his face details. So in the dark blue here, this is my outline consistency. Very small dots here, just a little bit of pressure in one spot. And then we're going to add his nose in light blue. And for the colors, you can check the description of my video below and I'll list all the colors that I've mixed to get these light and dark blues. And then we're going to add some buttons here. You can see I'm kind of wiggling the bag as I'm piping those because I just want them to settle nicely. And then really gently just going to pipe some hands here. So again, not too much pressure. If I squeeze too hard with my bag, the hole is small and so we don't want the icing to kind of fly out like crazy. So just very light pressure to get it going. And now we're going to add our details as well to the present. So we've got our white outline consistency. And again, you can see it just pushing out a little bit of icing, securing it to the cookie. And because this is our outline, we can kind of do all these details at once. I don't really have to wait for the base to dry. You can, those first two white lines, I could wait for them to dry, but no need, so I can do the bow part right away. And whenever I'm doing small curves, I want to stay close to the icing. I don't want to lift my bag up too much because then I have more control in those small sections. And again, with the same idea on the top present here. I'm just going to put a bow here up top. And you can see how close my piping bag is to the cookie, and that just gives me control. It doesn't let my kind of icing go wild. It gets stuck on that cookie right away. And there we've got our snowman ready to deliver a couple of presents. I just love him so much. Next up, we've got our Winter Wonderland Christmas tree. So here, if you've seen my other video on the Christmas tree designs that I did, the characters on these seam shapes, this is the same one that I've used, so I'm just reusing it again because I thought it was a fun one to do. And I'm going to outline 3 different sections here. I'm not quite happy with how that first line on the bottom ended up, so I'm going to scrape it off and try again. So anytime something doesn't work, feel free to scrape it off. Nobody will know. And sometimes when I freehand, it doesn't always work out the best, or the icing just doesn't go where I want it to go. So I'm going to try it again. I just want to make it a little bit more even than it was. And here I'm just staying a little bit closer to the cookie so I have a little bit more control. It's kind of the same. I'm trying to fix it there, but didn't quite go as well, but a little bit happier with how it turned out. And of course, if you ever need to fix anything, or if you pull the bag away and you have a little tip hanging, then you can always fix it with your scribe. And so we're going to outline all our sections here. This will give me a guideline of where to flood and kind of keep that flood nice and separate. So you can see every little curve, I'm kind of very close to the cookie. When I have those longer lines, I can come up a little bit higher. And it just gives you a little bit more control. When you're putting pressure on the bag and that icing is coming out and you're nice and close to the cookie, it almost pushes that icing against the cookie and sticks it to it so that you're not gonna lose that curve. And then we're gonna go ahead and fill that with some flood icing. And just taking my time going around. And you can see sometimes if I have a lot of kind of icing bubbling out of my tip, I'm putting more pressure. And then if I don't have too much, I'm kind of taking it easy on the bag, not putting too much pressure. I don't want to overfill these sections because I really want that separation between the top, middle, and bottom. And while my icing is still wet, I'm going to go in with my flood. This is my light blue flood. And right away, I'm going to pipe in some polka dots. So we want to use flood because we want that icing to melt nicely into the base layer. So I want to use the same consistency. And this is kind of our wet on wet technique. And this is just going to let the icing melt right into the base, and it'll look like one flat layer versus having the polka dots on top. And again, here I'm just going around my icing and my outline. And then I'm going to flood the bottom section. And the reason I'm doing the bottom and not the middle right away is because we want to let these dry and come back and do the middle. So I'm always doing separate sections. That way when it dries, the icing doesn't melt together. It'll stay separate. And again, going in with my flood, light blue icing, and just doing big polka dots. And I'm kind of circling my bag as I do them. So I put a little bit of pressure and then circle my bag just to spread that icing out a little bit. Just because they're a bit on the bigger side. So I just want to spread them out and make them nice and even. I always have a hard time placing polka dots. I never know if, one more, should I, shouldn't I? So try to go with it. And then sometimes it doesn't look right and then you end up adding too many, but I think it looks not too bad. And now that it's crusted over, so you can see those sections still look shiny, but they're not wet looking. I'm going to go ahead and flood the middle. Being careful not to flood too much over into those other sections. And then just filling it, using my scribe. I don't want to overfill it too much because when we add those light blue polka dots, that's adding more icing to that section. So I just don't want it to overfill and kind of go into the top and bottom section because I really like that separation and I'm trying to keep that as much as possible. So whenever you're doing wet on wet, if you're doing quite a bit of icing, adding onto it, you're just adding more icing to the flood. So sometimes if you're doing a really big design wet on wet, then it might kind of push your icing off the edge. So you just have to keep that in mind when you're flooding. And then we're going to go ahead and outline our star. And again, I don't have to go to the edge. Sometimes the cookie shape isn't quite what I want. So, we can kind of compromise here. And it's okay if you don't go all the way to the edge. A lot of people do. And I kind of like the look sometimes when you don't. So it really gives you options. If everybody is doing something and you just can't do it, it's just not working for you, be different, do your thing. I promise you it'll look great. That's how we've discovered so many methods and so many different types of ways to decorate cookies. So there's no right and wrong way. There's just a your way, and get it done and look good. Put smiles on people's faces when they eat your cookies. And that's really the whole goal here. Then we're just going to add a few lines here of outline consistency for the base just to make it nice and easy. And we're going to add some snowflake details here as well. So now all my sections, my dark blue sections are dry, so I can go ahead and pipe these details. And now you see the difference between what I'm piping here on top with the white icing versus what I piped in light blue. So in light blue, it's kind of melted into that base layer. So that was our wet on wet icing. And then this is just sitting on top because now that my icing has dried, we're putting the details on top. And then it's just sitting on top there, not melting in. I have a really, really tiny hole in my bag and I'm trying to pipe them quite thin. So I always cut a hole in my bag and then I practice a little bit on a paper towel just to get the flow right and just practice the design that I'm going to do. This just lets me know how much pressure to put on the bag and, if I can do it or do I need to cut the hole a little bit bigger. So with these tiny designs, when your hole is this small, you really want to secure the icing with your first touch. And I'm sort of pulling those lines straight because the hole is small. Your icing tends to curl when it comes out. So what I want to do is just make sure that I got that icing secure and pulling it straight to get those straight lines. Very light pressure, just enough to get a line out. And then I'm going to add some white polka dots here, just add a little bit more interest. And there we have our Winter Wonderland Christmas tree. Next up, we have our heart cookie present. So I'm just outlining with my white outline consistency. And whenever I do hearts, I like to kind of overline the top section, that little V. I want to make sure that it goes in a little bit because flood icing tends to flow outwards. So when you have an sort of like a point pointing inside to the middle of your cookie, your flood wants to sort of flood over that section because it's naturally going to push outwards. So sometimes when I have like a V shape inwards towards the cookie, I want to over pronunciate that outline so that the icing really stays in there and doesn't, make that V shape of the top of the heart. It doesn't kind of melt it together and lose that heart shape. Again, these are just things that over the years when I've decorated cookies, it's happened to me. So I just try, little things that I don't realize anymore that I do because I do it without thinking now. But as you go, you learn, and through your mistakes, as much as we hate making them, that's when you learn the most. As soon as you realize, oh no, my icing's bleeding, I have craters, it's flowing off the edges, like what do? That's when you start researching and finding the answers to make your cookies better and to get a better grasp on the consistencies and the icing and the decorating as a whole. So if you've made mistakes, don't worry about it too much. We've all made these really bad mistakes. I've had horrible sets and I thought, oh my gosh, it's just going to be the end of the world. Everybody's going to hate them. And I promise you, people love cookies no matter what. The decoration can be terrible. People still love cookies. So don't be hard on yourself. Don't be scared to try new things. Go for it. Have fun with it. You can always eat the bad evidence. So we just finished up our wet on wet design and I'm going to add some details here. So this was similar to the tree that we did. And then I'm going to do the ribbon, and unfortunately my line broke. Thankfully it broke in a good spot because this is a dark icing. If I did try to lightly scrape it off, it probably would have marked my white icing, but that's okay. And you can see towards the bottom of the heart, I have a nice little indent or kind of crater, or I don't know what you want to call it, in the bottom there. And when I went to go grab my cookies, this icing for some reason wasn't behaving the best, and it didn't dry enough, or I didn't leave enough time to dry. So my finger by accidentally smushed that icing down there. So again, things happen all the time, even to people that have, like me, that have done thousands of cookies. So like I said, nobody will notice those things, only you will. And we're just here to make fun cookies and put smiles on people's faces. So I've got my ribbon outlined here, and I've just put some outline consistency down in the middle, and that will help prevent craters. So a couple things with preventing craters is we want to pipe these details when our base layer is crusted over but not fully dry. So my little finger indent on the bottom of the cookie kind of explains what crusted over means. That means the top looks dry. It kind of feels dry. If you touch it very gently, it won't crack. But if you push down or push hard enough, it will break through. So when you have a layer that's not fully dry but crusted over, that also helps prevent craters. So I tried to do as many details as I can at that stage, especially things like this. It's not always possible. Sometimes you can't finish all the details on a cookie, but if you can, that really helps. And then of course, adding our little squiggles in our outline consistency, that also helps. So if I can put a few things together to help the craters, I'll do as many as I can, because you can never be too sure. And you know what, even sometimes when you do everything right, you still end up with them, but that's cookie life, I suppose. So here I'm just going to outline a bow. So I'm doing a big triangle shape, and then about the 2/3 or so up, I'm going to put a line across, and that will give us our ribbon. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill. And this is my outline consistency, so I'm going to fill it nicely and then smooth it with my scribe because it needs a little bit smoothing out. And these sections are a little bit uneven. So where the ribbon is, it's a lot higher than where the white part of the heart is. So just go with it, fill it up as best as you can. It's kind of awkward to pipe, but just do your best. And again, same with the bottom of the ribbon here, just going to roughly outline, and then with the same consistency, I'm going to go in and fill it. It's very narrow, not a big space, so it'll work perfectly to be filled with the outline consistency. And I didn't wait for the outline to dry, just filled it right away, just being impatient and just for me to kind of smooth it out and, fix it if I needed to. And again, it's kind of uneven. There's bumpy parts to it. Some areas are higher than lower. You can't really tell in the video, but it feels awkward to pipe it, but just go with it. I promise it'll look great at the end. And there's our present cookie. Off to our reindeer cookie. So again, this one I roughly outlined the shape. I didn't have a cutter either for this one, so I hand cut this one. And again, you can tell the edges are a little rough, but we're not here to be perfect. So again, I'm just making sure that I'm outlining the outside of the yellow line. So I just want to make sure that I've covered it completely. So any curvy sections, I stay nice and close to the cookie. Any kind of longer sections that are straight, I can lift my bag up a little bit higher. And the reason we lift our bags up off the cookie is it gives us a nice smooth line. If I were to drag my piping bag along the cookie, it would probably not look very nice because it wouldn't be very straight. And so that's the whole reason why we sort of lift our bag, gives us a nice smooth line. And anytime there's a corner or like a really sharp change in direction, I want to touch my bag down to secure the icing and then pull my icing the other way. Now here I'm going to use my outline consistency again, so the same one that we just used to trace the outside, and I'm going to fill the very small sections. I'm not too worried about the body and the head because they're kind of wider, but the legs, the tail, the ear, those are the areas that are small. And even though it's connected to the bigger area, because they're kind of sectioned off, they may crater, and so that's why I put those squiggles there. It's hard to know exactly which areas will crater, which won't, but it takes a few seconds. So if I think it might, or I'm not sure, then I'll put it in there. And then we go ahead and flood. I don't wait for those squiggle lines to dry. I like to let my outline dry, and that holds the shape in really well. But the squiggles, are no need to let those dry. You can just go right in there and flood. And again, it's personal preference. Some people let it dry. I have, broke it off with my scribe by accident. And so it starts just floating around in my flood and it doesn't look too nice. So That's the reason I don't like to let my squiggles dry. Whereas my outline, I like to let dry because otherwise if I'm flooding, sometimes my flood will actually push the outline further and then I lose the shape that I wanted. So that's sort of the reasoning why I do it. And again, it's just trial and error for me. I've tried it several ways, but you kind of find things that work for you. Nothing is right, nothing is wrong. It's whatever gives you the best results, whatever you feel comfortable with. That's what you want to do. And then I'm going to let this crest over for a little bit. And I'm going to come back and do the antlers. And so you can see very, very close, sort of pushing the icing just enough to kind of force it out of the bag, but not, at a crazy speed because we still want control, and keep it nice and close so that icing gets stuck to the cookie. Something to think about too when you're making your outline consistency. If your icing is too thick, it's hard to smooth out for details, but it also doesn't stick well to the base of the cookie. So if your icing is really dry, it's usually thicker, and it's drier, so it doesn't quite stick too well to the cookie. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. If your outline is not sticking well to the cookie or it's breaking constantly, it could be too dry. So here I'm using my outline to fill in the antlers as well. And you can see I'm wiggling my bag as I go, and I'm just trying to smooth the icing as I go. So it's doing some of the work for me, and then I'll go in with my scribe and just do a little bit more. But you can see it's quite settled because I was moving my bag at the same time. If you can't do that or you find it uncomfortable, you can just pipe it and go in with your scribe. And you can see it takes a little bit of work to jiggle it all smooth. But the more you kind of work at it, the more it settles nicely, and it gives us a nice puffy antler. Then I can go ahead and do the nose. And again, it's kind of an uneven surface, but we just go with it. Just kind of in one spot and jiggle my bag around to spread it out a little bit. And then just go in with my scribe and try to smooth it out nicely. And then I'm going to go with my outline here and just do these kind of U's around here. Just very, very, very close, pretty much dragging my bag onto the cookie here. And then I'm going to go ahead and outline very close to the top of those U sections. And it's kind of like that sort of doily looking, lacy, frilly edge. And I'm just going to try and connect all of them. So I have one there that I had to just connect with the scribe because it wasn't quite even with all the rest of them. And so that's just going to be a nice little detail on the outer edge. And then we're going to fill the middle part here. So again, I'm just going to put my squiggly line. So my base is not fully dry, so that's a bonus. But my squiggly line, that's another bonus against craters. And then just lightly flood right on top. We could have done this with the outline consistency again, but I figured we should be okay because we have that base layer that's still a little bit wet underneath, so that should help us. And then we're just going to add his eye, and this is in my outline as well. And we're going to let this dry for a little bit, and then we're going to add a little snowflake detail on top here. And again, very, very small, tiny hole. So we're going really slow, light pressure. I'm trying not to break or have the icing curl on me. So touching down to secure it and then just gently pulling it with a little bit of pressure. And that is our reindeer. Okay, now we're doing our candy cane. So people love or hate doing candy canes. I love it, but at the end of the video, you might think, not so much anymore. So we're going to outline in our dark blue here, and we're going to try to do 3 colors, our dark blue, our light blue, and our white. So again, any small curves, see on the inside curve here, I'm staying really close to the cookie just to have full control. Those outer curves are a little bit smoother, bigger, so those are easier to pipe. And then what I'm going to do is just add the colors. Now, you can outline in whichever colors. I just wanted to do it this way for myself so that I would know which colors to fill in. Sometimes when you're doing these, it just, it's easy to mess up and fill in the wrong section, the wrong color sometimes. So I'm just going to go in and I keep switching my bag. So this is my outline consistency, and I'm kind of doing like a semicircle to give the candy cane a little bit more design, I guess, and not make it so flat looking. And again, I'm just alternating colors. I don't necessarily have to do every single color there. I could have done it, you know, in just the 2 blues, but just for peace of mind, so I know which ones to color and which ones I need to do. So I'm trying to do the white sections a little bit smaller, so that's why those lines are a little bit closer together, which afterwards I'll show you that is probably not the best decision, but we're not here to be perfect. Like I said, I'm here to show and be transparent and show you guys that things happen even to the best of us, even when we try and prevent them from happening. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark all the sections with my outline here, my little squiggles. And again, just marking it for myself so I know which ones I need to fill in. And I'm also doing this to prevent craters. Even in that tiny section, I just want to put a line. I don't have space to squiggle it, so just a line just to help it have some support. And again, just very light pressure, not going too much over my outlines. I don't want to cover my outlines too much because I don't want them to seep into the other sections. And because I want a nice smooth line in between each color, so if I pipe too much over one section and then not enough, you know, further down the line, it might look a little bit wavy versus a nice straight line. So very, very light pressure. You can see not a lot of icing is coming out of my bag. And I can't quite get into all the corners sometimes, so that's when I go in with my scribe. If I tried to pipe in a very tiny corner, I may pipe over the line that I'm not supposed to. So your scribe's your best friend. Use it when you need to. Pull the icing into those corners that you can't quite reach with your bag. It really, really helps. Such a basic tool, but it's super necessary, I find, for cookie decorating. Like I said, you don't need a scribe needle, let's say. You can get, you can use a toothpick if you'd like as well. That works just as good. And then we're going to go in, now that those sections have crusted over, we're going to go in with our light blue icing. And again, we're doing the same thing. We're doing our squiggles with our outline consistency. And then we're going to go ahead and flood on top. And again, I'm just being very careful around those sections where I've flooded right beside it. So I'm trying to make those lines as smooth as possible. So I don't want to flood too much on top of what I've already decorated there, like the dark blue icing. So you see in the corner it was really hard to get, so I'm just going to pull it in with my scribe and just kind of smooth it out as best as I can to make that line nice and clean. And again, if your icing is flowing too fast for these small sections, this is not a really big cookie, it's maybe 3 inches tall or so. Might look a little bit larger than it is, but when it's small like this and your icing is really flowy, or your bag, maybe your hole in the bag was cut too big, you may need to rebag your icing and cut the hole a bit smaller so you have more control over that icing. So sometimes when you're doing a set like this, and let's say you're doing a bunch of candy canes and you have some other designs, you might want to do these candy canes first and have a smaller hole for your flood. And then if you have to flood bigger cookies in this same color, you can always cut your bag bigger without having to put the icing in a new bag and cut it smaller again. So again, when you're thinking about sets and how big to cut the hole, sometimes I try to get around it and just, you know, do what I can. And if I cut the hole too big, just don't put so much pressure on the bag, but it doesn't always work and sometimes it gets messy. So, and then I'm going to go in with my white outline consistency. So now both blues have kind of crusted over, and I'm using my outline because this is a very small section, which I will regret pretty soon doing, because even though I'm using my outline consistency, I will show you guys that this does crater as well. So I use a dehydrator as well, which is really great for helping craters because it circulates the air and it dries the icing a little bit faster. So then it kind of crusts over everything. But even that, and using my thicker icing, it just wasn't working today. So this icing, I don't know, for some reason, I may have added too much corn syrup, or I kind of eyeballed the stuff because I was just doing it for the set. And so it wasn't drying the way that I normally like it. It was a little bit too glossy, and so something just seemed off with it, and so it did give me a few problems. But again, they still looked great, I think. And I'll also show you how to fix those craters. So if they really, really bug you, you can see them here now. The icing's dry. It looked fine when it was wet, but I've got a few craters and an indent there on the third spot. And then the fourth, again, kind of a crack in the icing. So I will show you guys, if you have these holes, this is what we're referring to as craters. Sometimes they're a lot larger than this. So how we're gonna fix these craters is we're gonna put a little tiny bit of flood icing in them, and then we're gonna use a paintbrush that I've dampened slightly on the damp paper towel that I have, and we're gonna spread it out a little bit. So basically just fill the hole and kind of blend it in as much as possible. Does it look perfect? No. Can you see it? Probably, but will most people notice? Not so much. So it's kind of a, does the hole bug you more than the fix? To me, it kind of depends. A lot of people won't even notice the holes. I had a friend that I did a cookie set for when I first started decorating the first couple years, and I did these cute elf cookies. They were amazing, and then they dried with all these craters, and I was so disappointed because I just wanted to make them super special for her and her kids. And when I brought it up to her and said, oh, I'm so sorry, like all these craters, and she's like, what do you mean? She's like, I thought that was part of the design. It looks awesome. Like, you're crazy. They look great. So like I said, we see our flaws a lot more than everybody else does. So don't stress over it too much, but I like to give you guys options of how to fix it, how to try to make it look a little better for you if that's what you want. And know that sometimes no matter what we do, it's not working that day, and we get, these things happen. So I think it turned out not too bad, all in all. Maybe doing this next time, I'd probably leave those sections a little bit larger. Maybe I'd prevent the craters, but I think it looks pretty good at the end. Okay, and for our final cookie, we've got a snowflake. So we are going to pipe the naked cookie. Normally, I would flood this and then pipe these details on top, but I think it looks pretty cool like this as well. So again, if you're looking for an easier cookie to do quickly, this is a great idea. Also, if people don't like a lot of icing on their cookies, another great idea. So here I've just done nice long straight lines. I was kind of focusing on getting all the lines to cross in the middle, almost at the same point. So not quite perfect, but perfect enough. And then what I'm going to do is just pipe some details here. So just adding sort of this V shape at the top of the line. So again, this is all done with my outline consistency. I've cut my bag a little bit bigger than what it was for the small details that we did on the tree and on the reindeer. Because if my icing is too small, it's really hard to do kind of these long straight lines. So I have a little bit more control with a bigger hole because the icing kind of behaves better when it comes out of the bag. Something to keep in mind, if you're going to bag cookies like this that have a lot of thin line details, sometimes they do break. So if your icing is too dry, they break off the cookie quite easy. So keep that in mind when you're doing this type of kind of work on a not iced cooked base. The icing, if you did a base layer, it would probably stick a little bit better because it has something more to stick to. But because the cookies are kind of dry, they're not like wet like icing is, and the icing is stiffer, so it's drier. So it doesn't necessarily kind of melt onto the cookie. It kind of just sits on top. So keep that in mind with these type of designs. But they're great little filler cookies when you have a few different designs that are complicated. It's nice to throw in these simpler cookies. And it gives you a little bit of a break too. And they look beautiful. So I'm just continuing with my lines. I'm just spinning the cookie so that I can kind of do them as even as possible. And sometimes if you're looking at it at the same angle every time, then it helps. And they're just little lines. I'm just touching down, lifting my bag ever so slightly and connecting the icing to the line and then again away. So sometimes they break like that one. So I'm just repiping it a little bit. If you need to fix it, you can do it with the scribe as well, just to kind of mesh that line together. And normally when you see photos of what we post on Facebook, on Instagram, see videos, we'll always show you the best cookies. So don't think that anybody else doesn't have any of the problems. We all have them. We just showcase the best, of course, because nobody likes to show all the mistakes. I really like how this one's coming together. just a few simple lines, and it's nice to practice your piping a little bit as well. This kind of helps get a feel for those little lines and details, so it's good practice. And then I'm just going to go in here with my light blue because I feel like it just needs something else. And very, very small dots. So this is my outline consistency as well. I'm just holding it in one spot and putting a little pressure, and that's how I get those nice dots. I'm just going to add a few more here. And you can see me slightly jiggle my bag as I'm piping. And that's again just to smooth out the icing as it comes out. I don't really want it, there's a peak, you know, as I pull my bag away, so that kind of helps settle the icing a little bit. And that's the snowflake cookie. I hope you enjoyed this set. I really, really love this one. I know I say that about a lot of them, but this is probably one of my favorites this year. So I hope we get a chance to make it. Let me know in the comments what you think. And as always, happy baking.